This is Tasting Room Radio. I'm Terry David Mulligan, and we have stopped talking about wine and food and beer, craft beer, for just long enough to head south from Nanoose Bay to Vancouver to Victoria, and the annual Victoria Whisky Festival. And I said to the powers that be, I need someone who knows what they're talking about to tell me about the Whisky Festival and how this all works. And Iain Hooey was the guy that they pushed forward with this panicked look over his eyes. He is the vice president of the Victoria Whisky Festival. You're what, Iain?
I'm one of the co-founders with Lawrence Graham, and this whole thing started actually 16 years ago when two chaps, he and I, were drinking in the basement of the Willow Park Liquor Store in Calgary. And after about 5 drams, we thought we were intelligent, and we thought, could we do one of these whiskey events in Victoria? And,
why Victoria?
well, because this is where we were born and raised.
Okay.
Right, and grew up. So we came back, and 14 months later, with no funding, nothing, we put together what we thought would be a festival, and we couldn't get a hotel that would take us because it was a hard liquor event only. Tough. We came here because of an association with the manager that we had through some other things involved in the community. And he said, well, we'll take a chance on you guys. So he thought we were going to get 75 people the first year. 475 people showed up, and away we went. And we had some idea which way we were going, but it wasn't very refined.
Did you know that Victoria was a whiskey town?
Well, we had a pretty good notion just by the fact that there was a group in town that were collecting whiskey and tasting whiskey,
Yeah.
but we didn't realize that it was that big a dynamic, and it was just waiting to explode, and it has. Crazy amount.
So 16 years ago, what kind of state was the Canadian whiskey business in?
It was pretty much cookie cutter style whiskeys. They
Yeah.
weren't getting fancy with
Yeah.
what their product. They knew what sold. There was no specialties. There was no people buying barrels of whiskey or asking for finishes in that. But we also knew that there was, because of the great connection there is to the old country in this town, that there was a lot of Scotch drinkers in this town too.
What do you remember about that opening year? What was the highlight for you? Surviving?
You know what? This is a funny thing, Terry. One of the funny things is that in order for us to pay the bills, we had to get 70 room nights, and then they were going to cover a lot off for us. And when we got 70 room nights, we were a couple of 6 years old jumping around the bed. We're safe because we were willing to lose $5,000 each just to see if this would fly.
Yeah.
And that was a highlight, is that we were successful first year out of the gate.
How many whiskeys did you have then?
About 140, maybe 130.
Did the whiskey people like it?
They thought we were onto something very, very different because of two things that we were doing. A, it wasn't for profit. The deal was with Lawrence and I decided it from the get-go is that 100% of the money, 100% of the money would go back to charity. We would not put any money in our pockets. Second thing, anybody that came to this festival would get a ride home. We drive everybody home. We won't drive you to another bar, we'll drive you home. Because we did not want any of this issue of drinking and driving, or us taking you to another bar and then something unfortunate happened. And when the agents came from overseas and the brand ambassadors, master distillers, they said, "You're doing what?" We said, "Yeah, we're giving all the money away and we drive everybody home." And they were fascinated by this whole new concept, the whole way maybe to do things for whiskey events. And it caught on. And when I say it caught on, we have people like 3 years ago, one of the brand ambassadors, he says, I was in South Africa, in Cape Town, doing a festival, and then I'm in India, in Mumbai. He says, and then I'm in Singapore, and I hear about this place called Victoria, British Columbia, doing this whiskey event. I'm here. I get why everybody is showing up for your festival.
And so here we are, Iain, 16 years later. How many whiskeys here now? How large has it become?
We'll do more master classes in one day than any other festival in the world.
Wow.
We will serve only about 280 different whiskeys from 9 countries. We will do 6 brand tastings tonight. And the great thing about it is when all of these ambassadors and master distillers walk into their room, they don't have to do anything. Our team sets it up for them. They don't have to do anything. And this is one of the reasons why I think that a lot of them come to Victoria, and we're actually pretty proud of it, especially when Forbes magazine, out of the blue this year, or last year, said that we're the 4th best festival in the world.
I just saw that.
Just, we didn't know if they were sneaking around here or what, but all of a sudden,
Well, somebody blabbed.
somebody did. And we were kind of thankful about it too, yeah.
Do you stay the same size?
Yeah, and we've been in this hotel, the Hotel Grand Pacific, all these years. We're not going anywhere. We were certainly courted once it caught on, and there's only one place you can go in the city other than here, and that's the Empress and the Conference Center. We were not going to do that.
All right, here's my guest for the show. You can grunt you can standing ovations or whatever. I'm going to talk with Davin de Kergommeaux.
Magic. The man, he has so many superlatives in his vocabulary. It is stunning. He's like an alarm clock. You wind him up and you set it and away he goes.
I think he puts them in a suitcase.
He's passion.
Dr. Don Livermore.
Extremely talented guy, and he's got great passion. And I've seen him in a couple of other places other than here, and he's out there talking about the great whiskeys that come out of this country.
John Hall, the legend.
The legend. First time I've seen him, he's back in here as a non-participant. He might be a consumer this year. He is a soulful man that I just think is a great person for the Canadian whiskey industry. Just magical guy.
2 words, Tish Harkis.
Vivaciously sensational.
Yes,
How's that?
yes. Yeah.
Like I know that she talked about the 41, or she's going to talk about the 41. Last year, the 40-year-old, absolutely exquisite. And I'm not sure if you had the chance to talk to her about how that whole thing was conceptualized.
Yeah.
And she carried the banner on that deal to convince the people at the head office to do this 40-year-old.
Would you want to say no to her?
Actually, Terry, I get to sit beside her at a dinner every day, and ours is the fun end of the table.
How about Lisa Henley, Buffalo Trace from Tennessee?
This young lady is one of the new all-stars, up-and-comers, and her cachet in this Tennessee whiskey is becoming more and more world-renowned, and they're going to see her at a lot more festivals, and her sense of carry about and the pride that she has in making her whiskey, I think anybody that walks up is going to be kind of dazzled by her personality.
And our last guest is a guy named Iain Hooey. Tell me about him.
Well, actually, to your listeners, Terry and I are both former police officers, and they probably don't know, your listeners may not know that, but you were trained in a troop, and I was trained in a class. But it's not about us, it's about our team. It's about the fact that we've created something that we think that works, that makes our city on the map in the whiskey world, and that's what we want to do.
Let's go talk to people. We'll see you next year.
You betcha. Thanks, Rick.
The Tasting Room Radio, and we're off. The 16th annual.
14th annual.
The 14th annual Victoria Whiskey Awards. My name is Terry David Mulligan. This is Tasting Room Radio. You can find us on the Mulligan Stew website, the new website. The podcast is there as well. And this will be a podcast, I guarantee you. We're at the Grand Hotel Grand Pacific on the second or third floor in our own suite. And this is our second time at the Victoria Whiskey Festival. And as always, we start with Davin de Kergommeaux. He's chairman of the judges of the Canadian Whiskey Awards and the author of Canadian Whiskey, holding it up now, the new portable expert, a certified malt maniac who has been writing and talking about whiskey for over 2 decades. It seems like just a year ago that we met downstairs in the lobby.
I think it was 364 days, Terry. I do. Yeah, good to see you again.
Thank you.
Awfully good.
Tell me about the awards last night. What were your thoughts going in, and what did it turn out like?
Well, these awards keep getting bigger and better every year. We're getting more response, more whiskeys being submitted to the awards. Last night the room was sold. I think the fireman says they can have 90 people in the room. They said 87 places for dinner. And we had well over 100 whiskeys entered in the awards. Some really wonderful whiskeys, and a bit of a surprise that whiskey no one had, that just kind of came out of nowhere, was 40 Creek 22-year-old rye, which won Canadian Whiskey of the Year. But we've had some other really wonderful whiskeys, like Weiser's 35-year-old, which was the Canadian Whiskey of the Year last year.
Right.
Back, just right fighting for that top spot again. And Canadian Club 41-year-old Chronicles there, along with one more Crown Royal. It's a 13-year-old whiskey that's only available in the United States. And again, the judges just loved that.
What about the new kids on the block? Did they show up like the new craft distillers?
There were some craft distillers there. Yes, we had from Yukon. We had two brewers with their fabulous single malts. I think they're the first Canadian single malt distillery to actually go world class. We had Lowen McKinnon there from Vancouver. Okay, wonderful. Now Shelter Point.
Yeah.
Got special accolades for one of their single malt whiskeys, or one of their barley whiskeys, called Montford DL. They can trace that back to the exact plot of land where the barley was grown to make that whiskey. And so yes, we had quite a few of the small distillers showing up. And the artisanal distiller of the year was Last Mountain Distillery from Saskatchewan. So it's they're starting to show more interest, and now that their whiskey's getting older, they can compete with some of the big boys. Like we've had, Stock and Barrel from Toronto, right at the very top a few years ago. It still depends what the competition's like.
I saw a headline on my flipbook iPad just 2 days ago, talking about the 10 best. I think it was Vogue. I could have the magazine wrong. The 10 best whiskey festivals in the world, and Victoria was number 4. It has earned that reputation.
Yeah, I don't read Vogue, but I can tell you the person who wrote that article probably underrated Victoria Whiskey Festival, because I've been to many festivals in Japan and Europe and England and of course all over America and Canada, and honestly, this is a world-class festival. They get wonderful presenters here, fabulous whiskeys, and I think it helps that it's in January when there aren't a whole lot of others going on, and so all the brands send their very best people and their best whiskeys to Victoria.
What's it done to distilling here on Vancouver Island? Has it encouraged others to come along?
It has certainly encouraged people to approach local whiskeys as a connoisseur would, and of course the whiskeys that are produced locally so far are really quite, if you include Vancouver, are really quite on that level. Lowen McKinnon, really a wonderful whiskey from Central City Brewing, and Shelter Point is right up there.
Courtney Como. He is Davin de Kergommeaux. He's chairman of the judges for the Canadian Whisky Awards and author of Canadian Whisky, the New Portable Expert. There's a new version of the Canadian Whisky?
I think the book that you have from last year is the same one. This is the second edition.
Okay.
It's the third cover. They changed the cover when they brought out the paperback, and then now there's a new edition, which we're still calling the new edition, but it's about a year and a half since it was released. It's people should feel quite comfortable buying themselves a copy, and a gift for a friend as well, though, anytime they want.
Is it important for you to make sure that you include or mention new distilleries that are coming along in between issues of the book?
Yes, very much so, and we have a lot of the new whiskey distilleries included in the second edition. A lot. In fact, they've got their own chapter as well as the mentions along the way. But I'll tell you what I've done, Terry. I'm working with Blair Phillips. He's my writing partner. He's the Canadian editor for Whisky Magazine. We're doing a book called Canada Distills, and it includes all of the distilleries, small and large, in Canada. All of the distilleries, 170 distilleries in that book, and it's going to be out right after Christmas in 2020.
Davin, let me take you back to when you were a young Davin.
Oh.
How young were you when whiskey popped up on your radar, and how did it happen?
Well, I think there were 3 times it popped on my radar. As a very, very young boy, about 8 years old, my father was driving from Windsor to Ottawa, took the wrong turn in Belleville, and we ended up in the compound of the Corby Distillery, which was still operating then. And it was just like a frontier town. It scared the daylights out of me. And then, yeah, right. And I was just thinking the other day, about 45 years ago, I wrote a story about beer and whiskey, and it was all talking about comparing is Scotch better because it's 69, VAT 69, or is Labatt's 50 better, even though it has a lower number. So it was that. But really, I didn't get started until 1998, writing about whiskey, about 20 years ago or so. And you know, my doctor had said, you know, you need to drink more. His parking lot's full, by the way, Terry. I can give you his address if you want. So I said, well, you know, I'm not a big wine guy, even though I'm trained as a sommelier. And he said, well, you know, it's the alcohol. It's not the red wines. So I started drinking Scotch, and it just took off. I started writing about it, and we launched the Malt Maniacs back then. I think we were the only non-commercial website in 1998, and we had no concept how big it was going to become, and it did. And you know, visited a few distilleries, and you know, just going in there sheepishly wondering if they'll show us around, and it turns out we're big stars and all that. So it's hilarious. So,
Tell me the difference between judging and tasting from a sommelier's perspective for wines, for example, big dark red wines, and whiskeys. Are you touching the same notes? Are you looking for the same sort of things that we would from judging wines?
well, I think broadly, yes. The thing that I like, that I really look for in a whiskey is that it is well balanced, so no sore thumbs, nothing sort of sticking out. In whiskey or wine, you want it to feel like an integrated whole. It's one thing, and you know, so I like a whiskey that, you know, it feels good in my mouth, it tastes good, and there's not just one flavor, either good or bad, that stands out. I like a nicely integrated whiskey, and you know, it's the same with wine, Terry.
Yeah.
You know, a wine you want it. I mean, you can have, you know, it can be a big fruity wine, or you can have a big fruity whiskey, or you can have, you know, something that's more spicy. You know, we don't have Gewürztraminer whiskeys, but we certainly have whiskeys that have an equal breadth of exotic spices, and you know, so yes. It's similar, but I would say that wine people probably don't get whiskey. And I think that wine people make not very good whiskey judges. And similarly, I think that whiskey people often don't really get wine and don't make very good wine judges. I certainly would never consider myself qualified now, after so many years away from wine, to judge wine. And to be honest, the farther we get from it, the more I like any wine.
Dad, I had a great question. I was just sitting on the horse here. As we well know, great reds you can cellar. You can cellar for 5 to 10 to 15 to 20, and on, depending on how great they are. Mm-hmm. Most of the aging for whiskey is done before it gets in your hands. Does a whiskey care whether it sits in a bottle for 10 years before it's drunk?
Well, if it sits in a bottle for 30 or 40 years, you can start to taste some little changes, probably the effect of light on some of the chemicals. But no, it does not mature in the bottle. The first 3 or 4 weeks, it might improve because of bottle shock, same as you have in wine, or bottle sickness, they call it in whiskey. But no, after it's settled down in the bottle, it does not mature at all. It may change a little bit. They have what they call old bottle effect, kind of a mustiness, not an unpleasant one, but you know, maybe mushroomy, let's say something like that. Not umami, but maybe mushroomy. So no.
What's your oldest bottle at home then?
I don't think I have anything since about the 1940s. Yeah, I have some Crown Royal from the 1940s.
What's the oldest you've tasted?
I've tasted 70-year-old Scotch, which was pretty good. I loved the 50-year-old Highland Park. I've tasted some Canadian Club, which was bottled in 2014 and was distilled in the 1950s, so it's, 60 to 70 years old. And yeah, I've tasted some very old whiskey. And to be honest, no matter what anybody tells you, there's only one way for whiskey to get good, and that is for it to mature in full-sized barrels. Other than that, you can take shortcuts and make it pretty good, but if you really want the exquisite connoisseur whiskey, you just have to take the time. I've met, touring in the States, because I write for Whiskey Magazine, and so I've done visited a lot of new distilleries in the States, and it doesn't matter what you want to do in life, there is a consultant who will sell you a way to do it better, or quicker, or cheaper, or easier. You pay him, he goes away, and then your whiskey's gone. I visited a distillery where they had a very famous whiskey consultant tell them that, if they recycled their temperatures in their warehouse, so what's warm and then cold week by week, that they could mature their whiskey in no time. Well, 6 months later, they went and checked that whiskey. They had 20 barrels in the warehouse, 19 of them were totally empty, and one of them had 20 gallons left in it. They said it's the best whiskey they've ever tasted, but also the most expensive to make. Yeah. So now they just do it the traditional way. And like any small barrels are going, the way of the dodo.
He is Davin de Kergommeaux, and he's the authority on whiskey worldwide, especially in Canada. You poured us something here. Thank you so much for doing that. What did you pour, Davin, and why? Tell me about it.
Well, I wanted to pour a whiskey that everybody can buy, so I want the one that's quite available everywhere and quite inexpensive, yet is a really, truly wonderful whiskey. I think right now the whiskey bargain in Canada is Gibson's Bold, Gibson's 8-year-old. It's got a lot of rye flavor in that. Rye forward, I guess they would call it, and it feels good in your mouth. It has a lot of complexity, and it's a beautifully balanced whiskey. So I thought let's do something that scores well with the judges, and it's totally blind. That scores well with the judges, and that anybody who can afford to buy a bottle of whiskey can afford to buy, because it's really quite inexpensive. I think it's $35 in BC.
Take us through that nose. Do a little psalm on us.
Well, the first thing I'm getting in this is some toffee or caramel.
Caramel.
Something like that. Oh, you got that too. Yeah. There's a little bit of vanilla behind that. Spiciness and big fruity, dark fruits.
There's a nut in there. I don't know. Is it hazelnut? There's maybe a hazelnut or something?
I often taste hazelnuts. I don't smell it in here, though. I think you're closer to nosing wine than I am out there.
Oh, that's smooth.
Rub your tongue against the roof of your mouth.
Wow.
See how slippery it is? Feeling of corn.
Is it kind of an oily kind of?
Yeah, that's comes from the corn that's in this. And it really is like creamy and smooth. And that there's a lot of spice in this, but it's not burning. There's warmth, glowing, but it's not aggressive like a lot of spices are in some of the less expensive whiskeys.
Cinnamon?
Yeah, I found cinnamon in this whiskey yesterday. I'm not tasting it right now, but there was loads of it in there. So
How much is this Gibson's Finest Bold? 8 years.
It's $35, I think, at BC Liquors. I believe. I'm from Ontario, and quite honestly, I don't follow the prices everywhere.
No, you would follow the prices in Alberta, wouldn't you?
Alberta, oh my goodness. Isn't it just insane? You go into like Kensington Wine Market, which is a private store, and they only have one store. They have more whiskey on their shelf at any one time than all 600 and some LCBOs have across the whole year. Yeah, Alberta. I wish every province was like Alberta. I really do. Because, what they really have there is selection, incredible selection. You're lucky in BC that you've got private liquor stores here as well. I don't know many that I know. I shop at the Strath because I happen to know Adam Bradshaw, and I know they've got wonderful selection there. That's where I went to get some of the whiskeys for our media tasting yesterday.
Tell us, are there any other, before I ask you the big questions, any other whiskeys that you want this audience to know about? I'm thinking they are whiskey fans or they're whiskey curious. So anything else you want to recommend?
Okay. I think that Gooderham and Worts 4 grain, which is the entry-level Gooderham and Worts, is one of the most beautifully blended whiskeys I have ever tasted. It's spectacular. It's up there with Johnny Walker Blue. It doesn't taste anything remotely like Johnny Walker Blue, but it's got all those beautiful flavors together.
Yep.
I think people should try Gooderham and Worts. But get it in a bar. You don't have to buy a bottle.
Where's it made?
It's made by Don Livermore at Hiram Walker and Sons in Windsor, Ontario. And it's a wonderful whiskey. And he's done 2 special editions. So one's called Little Trinity and one's called 11 Souls. And actually last night he was named as Blender of the Year because of that series of whiskeys that he's made.
He's our next guest.
Oh my golly. Say hi to Don for me, okay? He is changing how all the distilleries make whiskey because he has a PhD in brewing and distilling,
right?
But he's also got a brain, and he's making whiskey that really stretches the boundaries, but remains hugely palatable.
Does the brain tell you whether you like a whiskey, or the heart, or the body chemistry and precious bodily fluids? What is it?
Well, unfortunately, I've read many books on the subject which tell me that tasting is happening in your brain, and that's where you like. But no scientist can describe the emotional impact of a whiskey or of a wine. If you're sitting on a beach in Greece, which I haven't done, I'm told by my daughter that nothing tastes better than Retsina when you're on the beach in Greece. And if she tastes Retsina in Ottawa, guess where she is? She's on a beach in Greece. So no science can tell you. I don't like Retsina, but and I'm not fond of it, put it that way. Yeah.
Okay, big question for you, Davin. That is, and we talked about this last year, a year later. How's the Canadian whiskey profile around the world?
Around the world, our profile is rising dramatically, even over the last year, as more and more connoisseurs start to talk about Canadian whiskey, as more and more whiskey bloggers and media start to write about Canadian whiskey. It's now cool to know what the good Canadian whiskeys are. At the same time, the distillers are producing better and better and better whiskeys every year. I was saying like a whiskey like Confederation Oak, which used to be absolutely unbeatable, won a silver medal last night. The whiskey's just as good as it ever was, but so many other things, including their own whiskeys, have gone so much up the scale in terms of flavor. So it's getting better, and connoisseurs around the world are reacting, and now the general media are beginning to react, and they're almost competing to be the first one to talk about the latest Canadian whiskey. This
might be a tougher question, but it's the last one, and that is, what's happened to the median age of the whiskey drinker in Canada? Is it getting younger?
I don't know the definitive answer, but I would suspect they're getting younger. I know that more and more of the older drinkers are drinking less, myself included. We pick our drams, so we have good whiskey when we're drinking, and I think that the millennials are having a big impact on drinking whiskey in Canada. So they're a lot younger. The other thing that's changing is that there have always been a lot of women who enjoyed whiskey, but it's kind of a thing now. And in my son's generation, they don't even understand what this women and whiskey thing is. Of course they drink whiskey, and of course they enjoy it, and of course they have great palates. So it's that's something that's changing too.
Okay, I lied. Here's the last question. Did anybody do a panel, or have you heard a panel, or have you taken part in a panel called Whiskey and Weed?
There's a lot of talk about whiskey and weed. I think Warren Barbaro wrote a book about weed cocktails.
Do they work? Do they pair well?
Yeah. I can't imagine how they would. You know how marijuana has that really particular aroma,
Yeah.
and as a plant or as smoke, I don't detect those same aromas in any whiskey, and I'm not sure how they would pair because it's a little bit sharp. You know, the marijuana smells.
This is merely a layman's comment, but if the weed was grown in the same plot of land as the grain, perhaps it would all work out.
Hey, why don't we make whiskey out of marijuana seeds? Let's make whiskey out of marijuana seeds. You know what?
Do we roast them? Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and you would have to supervise that, you know, to make sure they're roasting properly, you know. And it's not just a machine. You have to smell it, and you know, just sample a little bit.
I like the way you think. Thank you, Davin.
Terry, what a pleasure to see you again.
He is Davin de Kergommeaux, chairman of the judges of the Canadian Whisky Awards and author of Canadian Whisky, the new portable expert. A certified malt maniac. He's been writing and talking about whiskey for over 2 decades, my friends.